are live. We are documenting our lives because it's 2020, and we're documenting this meeting with John and Ernie, and I'm Ted, the guy without hair. Because 2020 is the year of the Lord, and we are in the times when Isaiah, Ezekiel, Elijah, Moses, they all wish they could live in this times. And we are in the beginning of the greatest outpouring of the move of God's Spirit ever. And this is Ground Zero, the most strategic mission field in the world, Silicon Valley.
Starbucks at Snell and Teresa, Ground Zero. All right, I've often said there's more discipleship that happens in coffee shops than happens in the church.
But that's incorrect, because this is a church, but we're here.
It is now. All right. Lord, we just consecrate this church to you, this ecclesia that is gathered here in your name for your purposes. Lord, I just feel the weight of your presence, and I'm just so grateful. Lord, you've all brought us here through fires and floods, and you know the price we've paid. You have paid the price for us through your blood on the cross. And so Lord, we sit here in the shadow of giants, in awe and wonder, in hunger and humility. And we ask you to show up and guide our minds, guide our hearts, guide our souls and our strength, that we can accomplish what you called us here to do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Woo.
Anybody have an extra? Oh wait, I might have I might have one. Oh, anyone has one? Well, I'll borrow one from here. You don't have to get it. Just realized since we're recording it, I don't have my notepad because my iPhone was my notepad.
Yes.
So I gotta go old school with the notepad. Right.
Do you have a pen?
I don't have a pen. I'd like to borrow one.
Let's see if that one works.
If that doesn't work, I can go to the Casper. Driving car.
This one works.
All right, there we go. Russian space pen.
Really?
I think so. Maybe it was a cheap knockoff, but I didn't want to get the real one.
A Russian space pen. What makes a Russian space pen a Russian space pen?
I think that it doesn't require gravity.
And it's extra small to fit in space.
Something like
Not
that.
enough space in space.
Ironic, isn't it? All right. So, the usual way I work is I schedule the meeting, and then I write the pitch for the meeting, and then if people actually accept, then I figure out what the meeting is supposed to be about.
Good idea.
You weren't sure if we would accept until the last minute, so
Right,
you don't know what the meeting's
I
about.
wasn't sure if Larry was going to be here, if we're going to be meeting at a church for 3 hours, right? And we're meeting at a coffee shop for 2 hours. You have a hard stop at 11:30 to go pick up your wife.
I have a hard stop at 12:20.
12.
12:20.
Oh, okay, I thought it was 11:20.
It changed.
Oh, okay, so you have more time.
I've done a
My
hard
wife
stop
is
at
right across the
Okay,
street.
good.
My
Okay.
wife is right across the
Okay,
street.
so I should be leaving around 11:30 as well, so it's 2 hours. Okay. So, I was trying to figure out how much time to spend just waiting in prayer, how much time to spend pitching an idea. And as I was working through it this morning, I decided to go with the idea of a design brief. And what I wanted to do was to pose a problem to the two of you, and then collaborate on a design to solve it. Are you familiar with design thinking?
I mean, I've heard the term and I've watched some videos on it,
Okay.
and I resonated with it because I'm a design thinker.
Okay, good enough.
And
So-
I looked through that whole thing, and oh yeah, that's what we do. And then I thought, man, I should get into that more, and probably thought about it a few other times, and haven't dove deep into it yet beyond that.
So, if I can show you the camera, but too small anyway. Read the show notes to get the documentation. So, this is something that we did informally at Apple, but I started doing formally actually when I left Apple to try and reproduce how Apple solves problems.
So how long have you not been with Apple?
I left in 2014 October, so 5.5 years.
And where have you been working since?
I like to say I've done 7 different startups, although I've been at my current one for almost 4 years. But the reason I left Apple is that I had this epiphany. There were several reasons, but one of the big ones was that what I learned at Apple is that when you're doing something new, words are not sufficient. And you have to create an experience that people realize the world can be different than they've always thought it was. And then after that, you give them the words. So what Apple did with the iMac, with the iPod, with the iPhone, they redefined people's sense of what was possible and how their lives could be experienced. And I think that's what the kingdom of God needs. That's what the kingdom of God had 2,000 years ago. And at various episodes since then, where people had a novel experience of what God was like. And then afterwards, they created all the terminology to describe it. And since then, we tend to fall into this trap of using magic, of playing with the words.
So glad we're recording.
Right? Of playing with the words.
I think we might just post the whole thing wrong.
Well, we'll see where we go.
We will. This should sit like
It doesn't have a stable foundation.
no, it doesn't. But it was stable for a second.
And so, right, is that, and there's actually one of the theories, one of the secular theories of how language evolved, is there were powerful rituals, and then words would refer people back to that ritual or that experience. Because otherwise, evolutionarily speaking, language doesn't make sense. Because it's unstable. Because animals communicate with, song, dance, feather plumage, grooming, things that are expensive. It's very expensive to spend time to show someone that you're worthy of their trust, like the mating dances of birds, right? The peacock feathers. Those are very expensive signals of value. But to say I'm awesome is not expensive. And so, in some ways, this is a bit of a tangent, right? But that we've been, Christianity has the place it does in culture today. First of all, because Christianity did extraordinary things, with the early church, with the evangelization of Western Europe, with the monastic movement, with the reforms, the Great Awakening. God did extraordinary things, and people got extraordinary things with him. And that created cultural capital. And when those words refer to that cultural capital, they still had power. But as we have depleted that cultural capital, those words lose their power. And what I discovered is that people who traffic in words, who made their living around learning the right words and saying the right words, they have extraordinary difficulty grasping the fact that these words no longer work. And we blame the recipients for not hearing what we're trying to tell them. And so the goal was to say, okay, we need to create experiences of what we mean, and then people have to experience that through us, and then we give the words. You still with me, or have I gone off the deep end?
Oh, no, so I don't know. I've gone off the deep end. I'm so with you, I've gone off the deep end. No, to summarize what you're saying is, wow. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. It was saying the Word was a person. The person came first, and the whole message of Scripture is His presence, not backwards looking.
And the Word became flesh.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, the Logos was there beforehand.
And so that we were supposed to lead in our leadership, not, well, see, that's, since I know you guys all follow me and you watched my message Thursday night to the Hispanic church, because I streamed it live. What Jesus was talking about when he, just in the Last Supper, when he says, you'll do the works that I did and even greater works than these. He's saying, if you can't believe me, Philip, on the basis of my words, look at my works, the experience that people have had through what I've done. And he was talking about a perfect correlation between what he said and what he demonstrated. And not only was he was intentionally saying that, not just as an add-on, like one thing we want you, like we think of the message of the church being X, and then also a subcategory is we should do miracles. And he's saying, no, I want your I want there to be I want you to do ministry the way I did ministry. And it's like this is like it's leadership training. He's very clearly putting that there in the limited amount of time. The most important. He's summarizing in that Last Supper everything he taught them and everything they need to know. And he's talking about right there. I want you to do what I have done, and even greater works than this. In other words, I want your ministry to be the same as mine. This is how I want you to minister.
Right.
And it goes even deeper. This is what I saw on Thursday that I hadn't seen. The context of that, just before that, is when he had rebuked Peter. And he had rebuked Peter because he had said, "A new commandment I give you, love one another. Where I'm going, you can't go." And then Peter again wants to take what he says and digest it and put it on his own terms. I can go with you. Why can't I go? I'm willing to die for you. And Jesus said, listen, you're wanting to neglect what I just said. You're not receiving it. I'm saying you can't go where I'm going. What I need you to do is love one another. You can't go where I'm going. You'll come later, but not right now. And Peter says, I'm ready to go. And then he says, you say something, but you can't demonstrate it.
Yeah.
And he says, before sunrise, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're saying something, but your actions are not going to follow through. You're not ready for that. Then he goes on to teach them, I want you to follow through with what you say. And then here's how you do it. Folks.
So where's the here's how you do it part? What was the punchline there? How do you make sure that you do what you say?
Well, it's the whole context. It's me going to the cross.
Right, okay.
You receiving what I said. Well, one, the way you do it is you love one another. It's there, and then he goes on and he amplifies on it until all the way through his prayer until he dies. I mean, to the end of John, it's all about that. And he says, you're not going to be alone. I'm going to give you the Holy Spirit. You abide in me. The relationship is critical. It's not what you know. It's not what you've learned. It's not your words. It's the relationship you have with me. And then you abide in me, and my words abide in you. In other words, there's a level of faith. He says, whoever believes in me will do what I've done and even greater works than these. The specific context is Peter. You don't believe in me, obviously, otherwise you would already be doing what I've done and even greater works. You're not able to do it.
Yeah.
The solution is you need to believe in me. So he's rebuking his followers, his believers, and saying, you don't believe me. And then he's going deeper and saying, it's not enough for you to believe, this word has to live in you. So it's the word, keep going deeper, and the word and you will become one. And the result of that, so like we need to reverse engineer this. Everyone agrees that we're not doing greater works than Jesus. But not many of us come to the conclusion that, wow, therefore we need to fall on our faces because our belief is really falling short. And then it's about the relationship, abiding. If you abide in me and my word abides in you, then you'll ask all your prayers to be answered. You'll ask whatever you will.
Right. And here's hopefully that's good. This is the segue to that. We're having a dialogue on this. Is that so let me just start with the brief. And it's like 3 pages. So I approach this as a design project, which is to say, God, there is something God wants from us. And the goal is to figure out what can we do to give God what he wants. And so that's the framing. There's other ways to frame it, and there's certainly a framing, which is that God needs nothing from us. Why do we even ask the question? But I think God, we were talking about this on the way in when we were talking about automation and technology, is that God has given man dominion over the earth. And God could have saved the earth without us doing anything or asking anything. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. God is requiring stuff of us, asking stuff. He wants something of us.
Right.
Ultimately, he wants a relationship, but he's also...
Right, but he wants a certain kind of relationship. Right, he wants us to be sons and not slaves. He wants us to be friends. He wants us to be right. And in fact, that's actually the interesting, hard part. Is when we hear relationship, we project what we have in relationship with our father, relationship with our spouse, relationship with our state, relationship with the church, relationship with theology, and trying to figure out what kind of relationship is actually not a trivial thing at all. Because, and it's not that it's necessarily difficult. I like to say God is not malicious, but God is subtle. God is not malicious, but he is subtle. Right? God, it is not obvious, you know, at some level, yes, it's obvious, but in terms of actually living it out, it's actually quite hard. It's not an easy thing.
Well, it is what it is, whether it's obvious or not. That's all a perspective by us, because yes, he's subtle, or maybe he's not subtle. You look back and go, wow, I thought that was subtle, and it was more like a 2x4, but I was so hard-hearted.
Well, yeah.
It is what it is, yes.
I use the word subtle in a technical sense, in the sense
I'm
like
agreeing with you.
you have like a teeth of a cone, and if God doesn't fit within the teeth of that cone, like or you know the cells on our spreadsheet, if God doesn't fit into our neat categories, it's hard for us to think about what he actually wants. We tend to shove that into the categories and the words we're already known and comfortable with. And that's why we need to go through an exercise, and this exercise, to try and help us reframe our thinking and our categories so we can get on a path that better aligns us with what God wants. Still with me?
Oh, I'm over the...
I don't know your excited face from your confused face, so I'm still interpreting.
No, I'm very, very much with you, and I'm projecting forward, and I'm loving it.
Okay, good. Step one, requirements. So the vision, this is kind of my framing of vision, mission, and values.
Are we allowed to write on this?
You're encouraged to write on it.
Okay.
You read it out loud before you write, so the people on the audio can follow along.
I'm not sure if we need to change the name, but I like the name of the future of Christianity. But that's going to be the title of my book.
Okay.
So maybe you want to use this as Christianity Beyond.
It's okay.
I like the concept, but I prefer a different name.
Right. Right. So requirements. So top level vision of the world we want to create, and I go with Habakkuk 2:14. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. I feel like if we get to that point, I'm good. But as long as there's a portion of the world that doesn't know the glory of God, we still have work to do. So that's the vision. That's kind of the measure of success.
And we could, I love
Feel free
to
to- feel free
amplify
to-
this.
feel free
I
to-
would love to amplify this because, to me, transformation, that whole vision and everything,
Yeah.
The revival. People are like, where does that say in the scriptures? Like, where does it say in the scriptures? This is the subject of the entire scriptures. Every prophet spoke about it.
Yeah.
So we could amplify this.
Yeah. But as long as we're alive, we're good.
Specifically, no, I love this passage. The knowledge. Connect this with Jesus rebuking the Pharisees. And they're saying, they're arguing, and they get upset with him. And he calls them sons of the devil. They say we're sons of Abraham. He says, if you were sons of Abraham, you do what Abraham did. And then he says something, but you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
I'd always had that presented, and at least the way it had been presented, is very much a rebuke. And maybe it is a rebuke, but recently I saw it in a whole different light, where it's a promise, really.
Yeah.
You shall know the truth. Like he was prophesying.
It was a shall. It wasn't a should. It wasn't.
And he was, for example, Saul was one of those. You shall know the truth. Powerful. Okay. This does not say the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. It'll be filled
because it
with
already is
the
filled with the
knowledge
glory
of
of
the
the
Lord.
Lord. Yeah.
Like when Ezekiel,
blind, yeah.
when Isaiah has his vision, he sees the glory of the Lord, and the angels are saying the whole earth is filled with your glory. The problem is we are caught in bubbles with our eyes closed. We're around all this glory. Like, you look at this picture, and there's a man standing in front of the incredible glory of the Lord.
Yeah.
Creation. We drive here, we look up, and this is beautiful. No painter can compete with it. But we don't have his glory. We're caught in pain and in suffering. And what this is, and that word there in Matthew, that says, you shall know the truth, it's talking about you'll have an experiential encounter
Right, yeah.
with me.
It's
In other words,
Hebraic
the
sense of
living
knowledge,
truth.
not the Greek sense of...
Yes, you shall have an experiential encounter, very much like Paul. He was covered and blind and did not live in the glory of the Lord. He was persecuting the glory of the Lord, and he was a terrorist, thinking he was a great righteous man. Then he had an experience, an encounter, where he saw the glory of the Lord Jesus, the glory of the Lord, and that set him free. Wow, so this, I love this passage.
Good. So, I think we're sharing the temple vision. So, and then the next step is the mission, what we must do to achieve that vision. And, only what could he go with the Great Commission, right? I don't think they can see it from that distance.
If you tap on it, if you tap on this, they'll be able to see it.
I think that the lighting will
If
work.
you go and tap on this screen, John, yes, right there, no, right there, yeah, right on that, yeah, and it'll change. See?
Ah,
We will post this, possibly. You might never see this. If you post the video and you're watching this, we may post this, a link to this underneath.
all right, there we go. All right. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Oh, bro!
And teaching
Whoa.
them.
Make disciples of all nations. Look at that. Okay, finish reading now. I'll give my comment.
Teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. Okay.
You baptize them first. They have an experiential encounter. Then you teach them. This is so clear throughout.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
We talk. Talk is cheap.
And I think that's a great.
He wants there to be a demonstration.
Oh, and I love this. I haven't seen this before, but I think there's this rhythm there of baptism and teaching, experience and knowledge, right? Of activity and reflection, right? And getting that rhythm right is actually the hard part, because some people get so obsessed over one, they neglect the other. People go through a series of experiences and never reflect on it. Right? You've heard the saying about the guy who had, someone said, this guy's had 20 years of experience. No, he hasn't. He's had 1 year of experience 20 times. Right?
Love it.
Okay, so I think
You know that yeah, there's
I
this
think
huge
it's-
amount
so-
of evidence backing that up.
Yeah,
like
right, yeah.
sometimes going to see a doctor who's young, doesn't have as many years, are actually going to be able to treat you better because the doctor who's been practicing for 30 years has 30 years of repetition of 1 year experience.
Yeah, right. And so, okay, so we all align with
Not
that,
all
that
doctors.
if we actually went and made disciples of all nations, that would get us more or less to, who actually obeyed everything God commanded them to do, we would achieve the vision. So far, so good? All right. So that's the measure. And so so my goal is to figure out how do we actually do that. And so I came up with 5 values. So you're jumping ahead. We're not solutioning yet. We're just saying the requirements.
Values.
Okay, do that. Okay, so just to summarize real quickly, the 5 values I came up with, and this is just off the top of my head, but depending on what we'll look at, you guys help me refine this. Discipleship, unity, sustainability, honor, and incarnation. And
Why 5 and not 7?
because I came up with 5 and I ran out of time. I'm hoping you guys can give the other 2.
No, I think there should be 5. 5 is the number of.
All right, so what about love? Where does love come in? List of 5.
For me, love is okay. This is getting a
I'll
little
show you
deep.
where love is.
Love is a manifestation of unity. When I regard my brother as myself and their needs as my own, and we're walking in this love. I mean, to me, I don't have any objection to adding that as a separate thing, but when I was thinking about this, I feel like, in particular, let me just give you my bias on this,
I
right?
think unity comes out of love, not the other way.
Yes and no, because love has 2 edges.
We're hardwired. Like, are you smiling or are you happy?
But not even that. But the thing about love is that love for one group tends to create anger towards the out group that hurts them.
That's not love.
I know that's not love, but human, well, you and I know that. So the problem is, many different. The word love has many different meanings, as you know. It's not agape, right? But storge love is very much, mother love, which is right. And so that's the problem with is the word love is one of these words.
Can I defend you and answer your question for you? My initial expression was when he said unity, I would say love, like that's why I put a bracket, and say all of these are love. I am not opposed to putting love there at all. Maybe putting it as number one. But I very much agree with the point you're bringing up. We have to define love. Love is, well, maybe all of these words are overused, but love is a tremendously
So
overused
I would
word.
go to far. So we're to say let's make a 0, which is the love commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's 0, and then 1 through 5.
Yeah, like our values. We have one value, love.
Yeah, and then
That could totally be it. And now here's how we define that.
right. We have one priority. Well, it's funny. Like Jesus, they asked.
No,
Jesus,
I mean that's actually very, very powerful because when Jesus was saying a new commandment I give you, love one another, he was
loved you. Yeah.
saying, yeah. First of all,
Yeah.
like this is so like the future of Christianity, a design brief. This is modern language. This is for the Lord's Supper. Like this is what he was doing. Like he was walking them through what we're
right.
walking through.
And now
right
we have 2,000 years of experience to understand the failure modes of what the disciples didn't get and the church has forgotten.
Do you realize that the entire Old Testament was that?
For the New Testament.
No, like the entire Old Testament, was recorded as failure modes to learn. Like,
Yeah.
man, yeah, I'm
It's a
so
data
totally
set.
with
Yeah,
you.
okay, all right.
I love that idea of saying we have one value, it's love, and this is how it plays it out.
Okay.
Or we can be
Right,
like,
but and for me, the goal is to operationalize this, right? It's like love is the goal, but then these are the metrics for testing whether or not, and some of these things are more implicit, explicit, whatever. But in terms of like designing a system, the criteria we use to evaluate how good the system is working is it producing discipleship? Is it producing unity? Is it producing sustainable exercises of the kingdom of God? Is it resulting in honor, right? And is it leading? And is it prioritizing incarnation?
well, I like the incarnation and the discipleship. I see them as connection. And my first reaction, this is what I wrote this down. It wasn't 8 to 12 people that you're discipling. It was, are you following Jesus? Is Jesus with you? Like the incarnation, like I love this because it comes full circle. The incarnation is in the discipleship, which actually maybe we could flip those words too. I said, are you actually a disciple? Are you being discipled by Jesus? Are you following Jesus? And I wrote down 8 to 12 people because there's a pastor who wrote a book, 8 to 12. He says, you can say whatever you want from the pulpit. You can post whatever you want on Facebook, and there's really only 8 to 12 people in your life who know if you're talking smack or not. So whether it's in your life who actually know if you're telling the truth or not.
Yes. Okay. You're jumping ahead of me, but this is great. Okay. So
I would actually like this to be 1 and this to be 5.
this is just the order I thought of them. I don't know.
But maybe it's kind of cool that this is 5
In some ways,
because we conclude
Yeah, and actually, importantly,
this is the whole thing.
right. And just be clear, in this context, I'm not talking about this as things we should do. These are criteria we use to analyze the system, the thing that we're building. Like, and we can use this as a lens for evaluating existing models of ministry and designing new ones, right? So, yeah. Before we move on, I would say so we got 0, 1 to 5. Anything else that you feel like is
When
missing?
you said that, I totally agree with you. And my response to you about, like, these are not things we do, and I completely and totally agree. And that's why incarnation is not something you do, it's something that, yeah. And that's why I went so far as to cross out beyond, because I went further on my name. One of the reasons, my conviction of the name, one of my thoughts of the future of Christianity is this isn't something we're trying to create so much as we believe is inevitable and are partnering to the point that we plan. Like, this is what we see
Right,
the Lord doing.
we're trying to
We're
design the future
partnering
plan.
with it.
Okay.
What, in other words,
Yeah.
I believe this is inevitable in the sense that this is what Jesus wants,
Yes.
and he is going to be completely and totally relentless.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't
That's
do
what
it,
he wants.
and if we don't do it, he'll
Raise somebody else.
Yeah.
he'll raise somebody else up. And I also see this as we're hitting a tipping point where this movement is going to happen.
But, it's going to happen, but, anyway. Regardless,
Whatever. It's
yeah.
okay. I'm agreeing with you.
I-
These are something that we are, not something we do.
And the other phrase I always go with is the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Yeah. Or the best way to predict the future is to, well, Abraham Lincoln has
Right.
the exact same
Right,
quote.
but
He
the
didn't say
thing
invent, he said
is, like, I
created.
believe in where God is going, right? But I believe there is something that needs to be done to lay a good foundation for that, right? Like even your little,
completely
right?
and totally agree.
And because there have been abortive revivals in the past.
Yeah, I don't believe they were abortive revivals. I
Abortive,
believe they
but-
were incremental, laying a foundation for now.
Right, but there were times
But
where
having said that, we've grieved the Spirit.
yeah, right, and that's why sustainability is a huge issue for me, even though it's not really a churchy word. But like, if you're going to build a house, you want to make sure the foundation is stable and you can cut through. Otherwise, you just get a lot of lumber, pile it together, and it falls away at the first storm, right? All right, so I think we're okay with the values here. The overall value of love at the top level. All right.
That's how I would know.
All right, you're welcome to, you had privileges, you can do the next round. Okay. So this is just, I'm not like hugely wedded to this, but just to help me clarify what I mean by these things. I've kind of walked through, should we do the little thing there so they can see that? Yeah, I'm going to be able to read that one. Lift it up. Okay. I love the phrase following Jesus, except for the fact you see many different ways of following Jesus in the Gospels. People who follow him for food, people who follow him for healing, people who follow him to argue with him, right? And so for me, that's why I think that and in particular, my analysis, again, this is sort of off the top of my head, so feel free to and this is just a kind of a riff, and the categories aren't great, but let me just kind of talk through what I was thinking here, right? Is that one thing about being a follower is that you can project all your shame onto the leader. As long as I'm doing what I'm told, then it takes away my shame. It gives me a sense of belonging. And to actually be a disciple of Jesus means stepping beyond the shame and living authentically. We're actually owning who we are.
It's just I totally agree with your concept. It's just an issue of words.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use the reason I like the term "I follow Jesus," specifically that I was at a youth basketball on a Sunday. It's a whole nother story. That's where people are on Sundays. They're not in church. And somebody said, "Hey, he's a pastor," or whatever. They pointed to me because I'd done something that was like prayed for him. He goes, "Are you Christian or whatever?" And I said, and I was, the inspiration in the moment was, "I follow Jesus." Wanted to reframe it in a different way, and it so resonated with them.
Yeah.
And somebody else over there says, "I follow him too." Like,
Yeah.
I don't like calling myself a Christian because I don't want to align with certain brands, partisan of that brand on TV. But I love Jesus and I follow him.
Yeah.
So it's to me,
So I
it's,
love that
it's
sentiment.
trying to. What I'm trying to say is I was using that in the same way that you're using the term discipleship.
But there's more distinction though. The wonderful thing about following Jesus is that it's inclusive, right? I don't feel like I'm associated with a particular brand, right?
I disagree with
You
that.
just
The
said
way
that.
I'm
I
using
don't have to. You said that they loved it because they don't want to associate with that guy on TV.
They didn't want to add, and I specifically said they didn't want to associate with certain aspects of the brand.
Right.
But I'm saying I follow Jesus is very much associating yourself to me,
With Jesus.
with Jesus and with Christianity.
No, a lot of people say they follow Jesus, and even in that context, you deliberately didn't want to use the word Christian because the brand would have had the wrong connotations in that context. So you were just
I
distancing
wanted
yourself
to
from the
shift the way that people think, and then the follow-up is say, yeah, I'm a Christian.
Yeah, I understand.
believe in Christians, and I believe that's one of the
right.
terms we should.
But I think there's a and the specific point I'm
We either
making.
define what
I-
following means,
Yeah.
or we define what discipleship
But,
means. It's
yeah,
all the same.
right, yeah, and but the point that the thing that
Oh wait, I didn't even notice that you're like contrasting it to followership.
yes, that's what and what I meant by that is that it is certainly possible to follow Jesus without becoming a disciple. The Gospels are full of people who follow Jesus around.
Depending on how you define
Right,
follow.
but just right,
Showing up where he is.
yeah, just showing up where he is.
Yeah, I was defining follow as something different.
Right, I understand that.
Actually do what he says.
Right,
Follow him all the way.
And I think this is the tension. And
Be a
it's
disciple.
It's a real tension, right? Is that once you commit yourself to a system of improvement, you tend to become part of a club and a denomination. And like, there's this tension throughout church history of like discipleship, holiness movements where you're really trying to focus in on God that become very exclusive, right? Which gets to the next level, which is unity versus tribalism, right? And I love the phrase someone said is that it's okay if we have tribes as long as we remember that we're all Israel. That we're all Israel.
Oh,
We're part of the same movement, same nation, something like that. And I think that one of the reasons, I used to really hate tribalism, right? And maybe it's even beyond, maybe beyond fits here rather than the contrast, right? Is that, we want to have discipleship beyond just followership. We want to have unity beyond tribalism. We don't want to diss those things because those are actually really important. That's what got us here. But if we just stop there, we're missing out on the thing that we actually need to do to achieve our mission, fulfill our mission. And a lot of church today is very much in zero-sum thinking, right? And a lot of our structures are like, if I'm a member of your church, I can't be a member of this other church, right? And so we need to have tribes so that we can belong to something and be discipled in them. But we should not confuse that with the larger kingdom of God. And a big part of that, from my thinking, is design perspective, is having the incentives aligned. Because right now, the incentives of the Christian institutions that are doing the most good are aligned around perpetuating the institution. And they had to be, or they wouldn't survive this long. But how do we shift those incentives subtly so that we are making sure we don't sub-optimize the kingdom of God at the expense of the institution, right? And that gets into sustainability. Is that there are people who do try and work without a net, and what we find is that those can be inspiring heroes, and they'll be a martyr for something, but it doesn't actually change the world. I mean, Jesus, classic case in point, he died after 3 years, and he left shortly thereafter. And it's like, we can't directly copy Jesus' model because we'd all be dead childless. Right, so obviously we need to abstract from that and figure out how to apply that in our contexts in order to get something sustainable. Right, I mean, it's
It's all how you use words.
yeah, right, I understand,
I think we can copy
Right.
Jesus' model. That's the whole
No,
point.
but not-
But on the
not-
other
not-
side,
not-
you
not-
only let me do what I have to do. It only I can do.
Right.
And I will do it with you. That was the big shift.
we can't copy
Died,
exactly
rose
Jesus' script. Yeah, maybe we copy his model, but not his script. His script was, he sat for 30 years, he was baptized, he led 3 disciples for, literally, the script was, he led them for 3 years, and then he died. That-
Yeah, and in those 3 years, he multiplied himself in them.
Yeah.
In a small number, he left a clear leadership. He left a different leadership model, and when he left, he gave them the empowerment.
Right.
And then the secret sauce was the incarnation. He left himself with them through his spirit.
Right.
So Christianity, Jesus' model, his launch, is the most successful
Right.
movement ever.
Well, so the thing is that
But we can't follow it by looking backwards.
I use the word model in a technical sense. Okay, a model is a formal abstraction of an analog experience. Okay, we can't just duplicate Jesus' analog experience. We must abstract that into a model. And in fact, I think even the model might be selling it short. I feel like Jesus modeled many different things. And all of us need to find our model of abstracting Jesus into the thing that
And
we're
the
doing.
more applicable piece to us would be the model of his core leaders, because we are still his core leaders.
Well-
That's the key. Like if we're gonna abstract any It's looking at the experience of his,
Right.
of his followers.
But yeah, but I mean, like there's so many models to look at, right? And he was trying to solve a certain problem at that time, and we're not solving the exact same problem that he was solving. He was working in a Jewish context, and and frankly, like one of the big issues I've had to read is actually the fourth one. This is good. They're actually working into the narrative. Is honor, because Jesus deliberately picked fights with the Pharisees. They started it, but he did not go out of his way to avoid alienating the Pharisees. I think that's a safe statement. Like Peter said, what you just said offended the Pharisees. And Jesus said, you find that offensive, wait till you hear this. Right? And that was Jesus' model because of the mission he was on, which was to die for the sins of the world. And the thing that I have had to learn is precisely this point 4, is that I don't get to do that. Because of the job he was doing, he had the freedom and the obligation to pick fights with the existing authority
But
structures.
yeah,
Well,
okay,
that was part
we
of his
can
model.
talk through that also. Yeah, we have to go deeper, keep going deeper. There's also a whole nother case to build about how honoring he was to those leaders.
They did not experience it that way.
Of course they didn't experience
But
that.
no, that's the point. I don't have that out. My call on my life is
No, but
precisely
I'm
this one
saying
here.
I think there's going to be applications there because, anyways, it's a whole nother discussion.
He had a call, just like John the Baptist had a call.
There's going to be a place for protest.
Right. There is a place
There's
for
going to be a place for honor. No, in the context of honor and his honor of the fair. Like, what we don't understand, Jesus was like, everything he did, he was endorsing that system because he was part of it.
Sorry, when you say endorsing that system, that is a very tricky word. Jesus was not endorsing the Pharisaical approach to the law.
There was some ways that he was very, very much endorsing, not the Pharisaical was one stream. His Sermon on the Mount,
Yes.
he is not doing away with the law at all. He's weighing in on two different camps. He's weighing in on, and this was a long-standing argument.
I'm not trying to criticize Jesus for everything. What I'm trying to point out.
I'm trying to make a specific point out of it. By him weighing in on one, this was a long-standing debate. Do you understand the law this way, or do you understand the law the way he interprets it?
Right.
And he's saying, I stand on the side that you understand the law the way of the application to the heart. The summary of it. Okay. That there were two streams. That was a long. I'm not explaining it completely well, but that was a long-standing debate. By him being a itinerant rabbi,
Yes.
he's endorsing the itinerant rabbi system. He's a part of it.
Right, that part of the system is endorsing.
He's endorsing. And then by weighing in, he's validating the long-term discussion back and forth and weighing in on one side.
Fair enough. But, right.
Now he's challenging them in this area.
But here's this is actually, I think, a critical point, because this is something you taught me. I'm trying to figure out how to apply.
Yeah.
Which is that the Christian church, the Protestant church, has been a reaction to the Catholic church since our formation, and the Catholic church has been a reaction to Judaism. And part of that was, I think, an inappropriate application of how Jesus interacted with the Pharisees. In that we see Jesus proclaiming truth and offending people.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think.
And we misunderstand the context and the depth of it.
And like I said, also the fact is that Jesus was planning to die. It was actually important to God's plan that the Pharisees kill him. And there's a place for being a martyr.
And when Jesus was, exactly, no, I totally agree. Like, we misunderstand, like unbelieving, like, when Jesus was saying, I'm not going to give you any more signs, he's actually saying, I gave you all these signs. This is like the best I can do. Like, this is like, I just raised somebody from the dead who was dead 2 days, 3 days. And then he says, I'm going to give you one more sign. And he prophesies his own death.
Yeah.
He's saying, that comes across as protest. You can also see it in this depth of honor. In other words, I love you so much I see you, and you look like Saul, and you're a terrorist right now, and you're going to kill me, and you're going to kill my followers, but I love you so much. I'm going to give you one more sign, which is me raised from the dead, and then let's see what happens.
But I think the thing that I'm really pushing on here, which I think is getting at a...
In other words, he was not protesting out of his woundedness. He was very, very much taking radical ownership and being a father.
Right. And you know, or pointing people to the Father as okay, yeah. But yeah, I think we're agreeing on the fundamental point is that we have within all of historic Christianity, we have this sense of rebelling against the Father or being rejected by the Father. You know, and the way that we the model that I am proposing is a variant of is contrasted to that by saying the most important thing is that what we hold onto the truth that God has revealed to us is that we honor our fathers, our spiritual father, our earthly fathers, you know, political, theological, whatever. We have to honor them, and that is so hard, and it's so. Let's just say it's so easy to miss that when you read how Jesus reacts in the Old Testament, in the Gospels, that I want to make a big deal about it. And
no, I completely and totally agree with you, and we're just saying two sides of the same thing. I think one of the reasons, what I'm agreeing with you very much, is that reading of the Gospels is very much from a lens of a Greek worldview, a Western worldview.
Well, I don't think it's...
When you read it in the Hebraic context, with a Hebraic worldview, I think you see a depth that shows the honor much better.
But it's clear that the Pharisees did not read it that way. And I'll go one step.
No, I'm saying when you read the whole story of how Jesus interacted, clearly the Pharisees killed him.
Yeah, right.
And they rejected him.
Yeah, and the contrast I was thinking of is the story of Noah. Is that, Japheth and Shem covered up their father's nakedness rather than exposing it. And I feel like, I'll just be blunt, I feel like Jesus exposed the nakedness of the Pharisees, where they were failing to fall short of God. And I think that was part of his calling, and that's what was necessary for the circumstances he was in. You know, he said, "Woe to you Pharisees," publicly, right? He didn't go take them apart in private and rebuke
At the
them.
end of 3 years.
I understand. You got to that point, but I'm saying that, like, I don't think we have that option. I don't think we should ever expose publicly the sins of others.
No, I think actually Jesus is giving us a very good model. He's saying, I have the right to call these out because one, I'm one of you. And I'm so much one of you, I am going to pay the full price for everything you've done. I am going to pay that price. I'm about to pay that price, so I have authority to call it out. Because covering their weakness, okay? Shem and Ham, Ham uncovered Noah.
Right.
Shem and Japheth covered him. That's intentionally recorded there.
Yeah.
But we also need to see that that was intentionally recorded there. Like that story was known.
Yeah.
So what happened? Okay, after they covered him, Noah came to his senses, and the three of them together, and Noah says, we got to tell the whole world what you did.
And this is the whole story of, and
that's extremely important because the difference between cover-up and covering.
Yeah, that's a great, I think that's the point. I mean, I can even frame it that way, is that because Jesus had authority over the whole thing, everything was inside the tent, if you will.
And I don't think we understand the full extent of which it was inside the tent. Like these guys were claiming to be part of the covenant of Moses, which means we're saying we are inside the tent. We're part of God's people.
Right, but I mean, I think the application language is that, of course, within our domains, within the people that we're providing covering, right, we need to be able to call out sin. Like, I'm not against calling out sin. I'm just saying you got to do it inside the tent. And I think that, and historically,
I completely agree.
And historically, we found the problem when we call out sin outside the tent and ignore it inside the tent. Right?
No, I completely and totally agree with you. Like, there's a deeply radical application of that.
Yeah.
Like, in the New Testament. Here, let's see how his followers did it.
Yeah.
Corinth, the church of Corinth, they backslid. And what were they doing? There was incest, there was idolatry, which means they were all going and sleeping with the temple prostitutes again. They were worshiping idols. They were involved in witchcraft. That's what the followers did.
Right.
Paul, the apostle, the Jew,
A spiritual father to that church.
the spiritual father, and what does he do? He writes them a letter and he slaps their hand and he says, if I come up, it might be worse.
Yeah.
Okay, but he's writing, he's pleading with them. So all those sins, they get a slap on the hand.
And that letter didn't get circulated, actually.
And a tentative,
Yeah.
a tentative rebuke, very humble, and a slap on the hand. You look at Ananias and Sapphira,
Yeah.
okay? What was their sin? They did something beautiful. They sold a house and they gave a large portion of the income to the apostles. They did something beautiful and they posed that as greater than what it was.
Yeah.
In other words, they said, we gave it all. And Peter shows up and says, if you'd been honest about what you did, you know, we would have given you a plaque, you know, and we would have celebrated it, but because you lied. And I don't even think Peter was saying, I don't think Peter was making that judgment. I think quite the opposite. I think Peter was observing what the Holy Spirit was doing. Like my sense of reading it is Peter is saying, I used to read it like Peter's such a powerful guy.
Yeah.
But I read it differently, understanding the power that the Holy Spirit was the secret sauce, the incarnation. The Holy Spirit was actually leading the early church in a very tangible way. I think Peter showed up having made one judgment, or wanting to make one judgment, desiring to show mercy, but he's like, when he's talking to the wife, it's almost like, I wish you had sinned against me, because I'm such a sinner. I would have shown you grace, but you didn't. You chose to sin against the Holy Spirit, and He does whatever He chooses to do. And to me, the application is not what can you do to push the limits before you die. The application is to see the difference in the contrast of values. You trying to do something that, like, if you do that in the church, we would celebrate that, and we would definitely tolerate you you positioning it as greater than what it did, because we want that money. I'm saying we do that over and over and over again.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the Lord is saying that makes it unsustainable. That's worse than all these things that we think are the worst sins ever.
Yes.
And if we are going to embrace true Christianity and actually be disciples rather than just fans that are going to follow Him on His terms, not ours, actually let Him, He is going to call us to a standard and challenge us with these, and He's going to show grace to situations that we think are...
And I'll be honest with you on the confessional part, right, is that I used to think that, like, there were big sins like adultery and murder and things like that, and then there were superficial sins, you know, subtle sins like pride and you know, things like that. And now I realize where I'm at is that socially, okay, like socially murder is a big deal. You want to keep people from doing that. And so social has a structure, right? But in terms of sin, I think it's actually the other way around, right? These gross sins of the flesh are like the minor details. I feel like I've gotten past all the minor superficial sins, and now I'm down to the really hardcore subtle sins. Like the sins that I have now that I'm dealing with are actually worse than the sins that I was dealing with.
There's a whole scientific basis for this. I mean, just take the 12 steps, for example. They're helping people in the worst forms of addiction, and it doesn't even talk about your addiction. The first, it's about your bitterness, your brokenness.
Yes.
I totally agree that it's not like they're all the same, it's reversed, because it's the difference between a seed and a fruit.
Right. So this is my critique of Western institutions, which is the last point: incarnation versus extraction. Right. Because if you have this model that there's this set of sins, either of the mind or the flesh or whatever, then you want to take people out of their context, fill them full of knowledge, and send them back to judge those situations from their position of superior knowledge and spirituality. And to me, I call it the Minerva spirit, which is really the Greek. This started with the Romans sending their kids to the Greeks to be educated, and that kind of led to Neoplatonism, and that led to a lot of the early theological things, which produced some wonderful fruit. But at the root of this was this spirit of alienation, almost, of alienating the intellect from the body, alienating the priest from the people. And the solution is what I call embedding. Is that what you need to be doing is that if you really want to transform sin, you have to be embedded in the contexts that we want to transform, and we have to uplift people within those contexts and create contexts where we ourselves, right? Because it is horrifying to me when I think about it, how these seminaries groom pastor for things, and then they send them out in isolation. We say that where they feel no community, no accountability, no support, no discipling, and it's like, I can understand how that was expedient in the days when they were evangelizing Western Europe, because it took days to travel anywhere you wanted. As a missionary, we had this, but the training we provide them for is just so tragic. Anyway, this is the end. So this is the.
Well, what's page 3?
That was where. Oh, sorry, you're right. This is the end of the requirements phase, but right, I did have page 3. So this is the challenge, right? Let's try and see it. My belief is we need a new model of ministry, which aligns the. I don't have to memorize. Move your hand so I can read it for a second. We need a new model of ministry where the incentives and structures are optimized for fathering and embedding authentic communities of disciples who cooperate rather than compete to bring the most glory to God. That's kind of the punchline. About our hour in, so it's pretty good.
One comment is to phrase this in the vernacular. That's why I don't like the term discipleship, because do people in Apple use discipleship?
They use the word evangelism a lot.
They use evangelism,
Right.
which I love.
Okay,
I love that.
boys, this is not the public. This is not a public
Yeah,
statement.
yeah.
This is a design kit for the three of us.
Perfect. Okay, perfect.
I'll make sure that we're clear on what these words mean, and that it's the right crop.
The one thing, like, we need a new model of ministry. This model of ministry is already out there. People are already doing it.
I don't think so. I'm sorry. Not all these pieces. They're doing things. They're doing 3 out of the 5 things. I don't know
Well,
anyone who's doing.
I
don't know anyone who's doing all 5 of these things together.
It could be true. I'm just saying that there's been a remnant that has done it this way. I'm just saying I would articulate. I mean, Ed Savosa's ministry transformed our world, for example. I mean,
has many of these things, right, and honors many of these things.
To me, yeah, you could say it that way. I would say has done all this, and the challenge is to scale it beyond one Starbucks to a chain.
Well, right, and yeah,
And they have scaled it to a certain degree.
right.
And I would say the challenge would be to scale it far beyond.
The way I think about this is
could
that,
be,
and to be fair, like a lot of open standards we have in the world, is someone built a monolithic system that did one thing incredibly well. And then we said, wow, that was impressive. But if we took the top 20% of that and created a lightweight open source version of that, it would be just vastly more impactful. Right? So I think Ed's ministry emphasizes all these pieces, right, and captures all these ideas. What I would say is that it is not optimized for those 5 things. And I think that that is the thing. In particular, you and I have talked
Regardless,
about...
regardless,
Yeah.
there is clearly a need to scale this because,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, if you want to try the word scalable rather than new, I would be okay with that. A scalable model is created where this is done. Because you're right, there are pockets where this has been done in really inspiring ways. Okay, so the next page, and this isn't so much, so this is the challenge, is to try to brainstorm what that would look like. And what if we can do the next 45 minutes. This is just background thinking of some of the ideas that I found really useful when thinking about this. One is the idea of a, and these are, sorry.
the thing is, I completely agree with this. Is how do we articulate this? I think one thing I liked about Ed so much. You read his books. He's not claiming to say I suddenly was riding on a white horse and boom, I'm the Messiah.
No.
And the way it resonates is he's clearly saying I'm articulating something that I see out there. Hopefully, I'm modeling it. And I mean, he says that with boldness. I'm modeling it, and my movement is modeling it. But with the way it resonates over and over is people don't say, "Oh wow, finally I see it." They're like, "Oh, this is what I was doing," and he gave me a framework to clarify it.
Right.
Yeah. And to now I can scale it.
Right, yeah. Okay, good. So these are just some models of, mental models of how different groups in this space function that I just, one is of course the idea of ecclesia, which is, it's actually hard to find a good definition of what charismatics mean. Ed's got like the 5-page book, but not a like 1-paragraph summary of it. But a lot of people talk about ecclesia in the context of like the Legislative Assembly of Athens, or more generically, even before that, where the word was just gathering of those called out or whatever. And I don't really have a horse in that game, but I think it's a powerful framing to think about. Another phrase that I've been playing a lot of time with is the idea of a learning organization. This comes out of systems theory and Peter Senge, which is this idea that people used to think that the person at the top learned all the wisdom and then they would tell everyone on the bottom what to do. And we have moved beyond that in the modern world where the world is too complex to fit in any one person's head. And the ultimate expression of that is an organization where the entire organization is optimized to learn. And the reason that's a big flip is the way you learn is by experimenting and failing. And most organizations are optimized to eliminate failure rather than maximize learning. Okay, right? That's the thing. The third idea is this idea of a community of practice. The thing that I think I can say literally frustrates the hell out of me is that when I am doing discipleship in a coffee shop like this, I feel like I'm starting from scratch every time. Because the information that is out there is not optimized for helping me solve my problem here on the ground. I don't have a community of practitioners where we have a common language and a common context where we can exchange ideas and get better at it. I mean, there's the trappings of one, but it's horribly inefficient. It's like software development was before open source software. We could just figure everything out before the internet, where you had to figure everything out on your own each time from scratch. You can't build on it. And we have amazingly scalable systems for preaching, amazingly scalable systems for worship, amazingly scalable systems for theological education. There is no good scalable system. There's these interesting systems of discipleship, but those are all static systems. A static curriculum. There's not a dynamic learning system for just, if I want to level up from a level 1 discipler to level 12 discipler, and get my black belt in discipleship, I have no idea how to do that. I've been trying to make a way, but it's very ad hoc. Does that make sense? Like a JoJo. Practitioners get together. So that's the community of practice. And then the other model that I found very...
I love the model you had even for our meeting, the agile. I think that's a beautiful example of a community of practice that is very successfully modeled discipleship.
Yeah, but when you talk to the original Agile practitioners, this is a cautionary tale. They thought this would lead to a birthing of a whole new way of doing things. What's happened is the people who had a business model around a particular narrow way of doing Agile, Scrum or Kanban, those people had a business model and they have institutionalized their version of Agile to the point where the majority of people who are in Agile, quote-unquote Agile organizations are following a ritual and paying for a process without actually living out the values.
Okay, so
But
in
yeah,
other
it's
words,
a
the
great start.
cautionary tale is they missed this piece. And
Yeah.
somebody else came in and made money off of
They
it.
found something that was sustainable that did not reflect the values.
Well, that watered down the values.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
picked and chose the values. And they created the form without the power, right? And so that's why this is why I think this is really important to get these things up front in thing. So
There's
now-
there's many examples that may be incomplete, but communities of practice that are good at discipleship. And I think learning from them.
so what's the best ones you know of? Because frankly, the best ones I have seen at scale have been recovery groups.
AA is that's beautiful.
Yeah.
AA is an incredible movement.
Example,
It's
right?
one of the best examples
right,
in the church.
and their biggest, they celebrate recovery. The Christian.
I would even go to like any educational model that's actually working, as opposed to
Do you know any educational model that is actually working at scale, rather than out of heroic?
okay. Okay. No. I would say, for example, and I'm sure you'd be an insider, so you can show all the shortcomings in the system. But take an example like a high-tech company like Apple, for example, that has grown in a way that is unprecedented in the history of the market.
Actually, okay, fair enough.
Okay, they are really, really good. It's a closed system, but they are really, really good. And where they're moving now is creating their whole end-to-end educational system. So they're actually looking for guys who come work for us rather than going to college, and we'll train you and equip you.
Right. Actually, yeah. That's actually. I'll give you another one in the same vein. The U.S. Army or the military corps. Is that when you have a closed system where the production and the consumption are under the same roof, we have amazingly effective educational systems. People come in and train you for this job.
Well,
train you for this company.
they've attained certain values, but they haven't done it with an open source.
Or an open system, right? And this is actually the problem, and this is where it gets back to fathering, right? Is that, my favorite phrase, right? In the East, children are kept. In the West, children are released. From heaven, God's Son will send, right? So in places where the child is kept, where you're apprenticed into the world, and you work for your father, or you work for a
Beautiful
right?
pieces
Right.
of that model.
The problem is that you stay in the Father's shadow.
Yeah, you see something beautiful, but it's articulated so well in, boy, this was actually a movie, if you haven't seen it, it's like beneath all the silliness, it was like in tears. Crazy Rich Asians.
I heard
And
good things about it, yeah.
They show the I mean, it's a
Yeah.
farce. So they show the Asian model, but they also show the beauty of it.
Yeah.
But you also see the toxicity.
Yes.
This huge, the suicide rate in Japan, I think, among teenagers is off the charts.
Yeah.
Korea's even worse.
Korea, China, that's horrible. And then you contrast that to our values here, where children are released.
Yeah.
Like you turn 18, you're gone. Like,
Yeah.
And it's like, and there's another model that is Jesus' model, where he was sent and the Father was with him, they did it together, and now that was the model he gave.
And that's the hardest thing, is to create an education that prepares people to operate outside the context they were trained in. Right? And probably the closest to it would be something like, U.S. Rangers or Army Rangers, or Special Forces.
What's so beautiful too is some of the top leadership thought in the world right now is looking to the Rangers and the Special Forces about their model and realizing that like you think of military as top-down closed system, but the Rangers, of course they have that, they're military.
Yeah.
But as soon as they engage with the enemy, the leadership model switches, it's completely flat, and it's very, very dynamic.
Right.
And they're saying, like Google, researching them and using that as new models that they're in.
Actually, previous guy did a podcast with Chris Hahn. His partners with somebody who's comes in with Special Forces. They do mentoring and training and mediation and stuff like that. I should look up for that. Anyway, fourth model is this idea of a mastermind group. I don't know if you've heard this phrase. It's becoming trendy lately. It's been around, I guess, the Section 25. But the interesting thing is that the ones I hear about, some of them are just informal peer models, but a lot of these are paid models, where you will have executives paying like thousands of dollars a month to be part of a mastermind group.
You know, they pay $10,000 to spend a day.
Well, with
Gary Vaynerchuk.
yeah, or Dennis McEntee. But the point is that it's an ongoing practice. It's not just a one-time event.
Yeah.
Okay, the whole point of a mastermind group
And it's very, very high.
But you know, I have friends who are just doing three-person with themselves. But this idea of a model where like all of us want to get somewhere, we hire someone who's a little bit further along in this journey than we are to lead us. But it's not that we're coming here primarily to receive their wisdom. We're here so that we can experience that as a collective and help each other level up, right? And you know, one can argue that that was what Jesus was doing with the 12. Is something like that. As people had a hunger for something, they followed him, and he was trying to build them into a team that would carry this on.
And he did it extremely successfully.
Yeah.
And everything we're talking about is they modeled the early church
86%
model.
successful. 1 out of 12 failed. But
1 out of 12?
1 out of 12, yeah, that'd be 92,
92%.
92%, sorry, yeah.
Well, unless he was
Anyway.
intentional about that, because he could have taken them out early.
Yeah,
So,
but anyway,
okay.
all right, seriously, but yeah, the point is
What
that,
I mean
yeah,
is everything you're
it's
talking
impactful.
about. Like I think this is really close. Like Jesus had a mastermind group, a community of practice, effective discipleship, and in an open, without a dividing wall, open to everybody. And that's why the early church was so extremely.
In which sense do you mean by without a dividing wall? Because Jesus certainly had tiers of access. So I'm not sure how you're using that phrase.
I meant specifically, like, come unto me all who are weary and heavy laden. In the full sense of it, is I came to die for the whole world,
Right.
and effectively redeem the whole world. And then the mystery that was revealed, which was it's not just the Hebraic Israeli nation that has a covenant with God, it's all nations. And the effectiveness that, in other words, a mastermind group of practitioners who created a community of practice who went into a city that had a huge enclave of Jews that lived there. That was actually their starting base. And everywhere Paul went, we think he left the Jews. He left the synagogue.
Right.
He always ministered to the Jews. That was his effective. And the people who reached the Gentiles were his disciples. His direct ministry was always to Jews, both practicing Orthodox Jews and Hellenistic Jews.
I mean, that was certainly the heart of it. He certainly like baptized Timothy and other priests, but yeah.
There's a book I could give you through the baptismal records.
Okay.
He baptized Jews.
He never baptized? You're saying he never baptized a Gentile?
Very, very rarely.
Oh, this is recorded,
His
but-
followers baptized. No, and then you have recordings of his followers baptizing Jews, baptizing Gentiles.
Okay, I'm not sure where you're going. Regardless.
What I'm trying to say, going to this. He went in and took a group that had traditionally been very, very close, the Hebrews, but were in these social dynamics where they're open to being inclusive because they're cut off from their homeland and they're not fully accepted with the others yet. And he modeled all this. So in other words, everything that we have is open source and we're giving away. Freely we have given, freely we have received, freely we have given. Whoever wants to can come in, whether you're Hebrew or you're a Gentile, you can come in, and whether you're a godly person like a centurion who maybe is whatever, and you have a stable family and all that, or you're an outcast who's homeless, demonized. Or you're, like the woman at the well, whether you're an outcast of that society or you're in with that society, all of you can come in, whether you're a slave or you're a slave owner. Okay, you're a master or a servant. You can all come in, and it was so effective that after 2 years in one place, he had completely changed the culture of that.
You're talking about Jesus or Peter? Paul?
I'm talking about Paul in Ephesus.
Okay, so I think this is actually an important discussion to have because the last half hour here, we get talking about concrete business models. So There's a distinction about, and this is the last point about club good, so it's a good segue. So it's actually, the structure remarkably works pretty well, considering how randomly it was put together. So public goods are things that are publicly available, everyone can enjoy them equally. Like natural defense is a public good, right? And everyone enjoys it, almost regardless of participation. And like the scripture is a public good, everyone's got it, right? And when Jesus came and gave an open air speech, like everyone got it. But in Jesus, even though there was general availability, even though there was a path where anyone could approach it, there was still limited access, right? There was, the 120, the 70, the 12, the 3, the 1, right? There was that all the people in Jesus' life did not have equal access to it. All the people in Jesus' life did not have equal access to it.
Oh yeah.
Right? His public goods, the salvation is available to everybody, but intimacy with him was restricted.
When he was alive.
When he was alive, right. And
That's the miracle of Pentecost.
yes, the Holy Spirit.
Secret sauce.
Right, but the interesting point for me is that, and this is where I talk about how we adapt this model or adapt that model for our circumstances and what we need to do. The idea of, and that's kind of the punch, so the idea of a club good is the thing that's better if more people enjoy it, but it's not better if everyone enjoys it. The swimming pool is a good example, right? Like one person in a swimming pool is kind of boring. Having like a dozen people at a pool party at the swimming pool, like going to a pool where there's more people is a lot more fun. But if there's too many people, then it stops being fun. It's a good where there's this sort of curve where you hit this optimal point where the right number of people enjoying it cover the cost of it, but then too many people, it gets worse. And those become club goods rather than public goods. It's a term in economics. And this to me is an underexplored space because it explains a lot of things that are hard to solve in other ways. In particular, my hypothesis that in the last half hour I wanted to just discuss with you and brainstorm around based on everything we discussed here is the idea of could we imagine ecclesia as scalable discipleship clubs? Because you're the one at the very beginning you said, this works really well for 8 to 12 people.
I was saying it a different way, but okay, I see.
Right, but we're saying that like if you want people who actually know you authentically who you actually are, there's only about 8 or 12 people who really know that. Right? And so the idea is, right now, you think about if I am going to launch a startup with 8 to 12 people, I have a massive infrastructure of things I can build upon. In terms of, as opposed to like 5 years ago where you'd have to get $2 million from a VC to do something. I can sit down and basically for free, I can get free web services, free project management, free issue tracking, all these other things for free, and have all this lore and body of knowledge to say, hey, I'm going to run a startup company. And have a clear sense what the future directions are. If I am doing a small group, I can either plug into a church, which has a hierarchical system with a system all around that, or I'm kind of on my own. And what I am envisioning is almost like a platform where people can come together and say, hey, I want to form an ecclesia where we are we're a mastermind group, a community of practice learners or whatever, where this is the domain we think God wants us, the hill we think God wants us to take. And we all in this together, we have someone who's got a little bit more experience, who's the leader or the host, or a little more passion or whatever. They're hosting this event. And then that they sort of get a discipleship club in a box, imagining this thing. And that the model is that this is something we want to be sustainable. So you need someone to do the grunt work. Anytime you have a group like this, there's usually some amount of resources you need to make it happen. You need someone to at least maintain the mailing list, send membership beans out or whatever, or have the house that hosts it and clean it up or wipe it, whatever. And there's not a good social convention or investment tradition at small scales. At larger scales, you have the idea you have a pastor, and he's being paid, he's full-time, and he aspires to become like these mega pastors he's seen on TV. And there is a market failure for things between like a full-time pastor leading a church and someone leading a small group. And if authenticity and discipleship happens in a small group, then where technology can help is to take something that's hard and make it easier, and so that more people do it.
Exercise. Completely and totally agree with everything. I love what you said. I think the solution, if you just articulate the solution, I don't see it. If you want to start up right now, you're starting up, I'm starting up. Okay. The resources that you have available to you, even if you go back 3 years, we're not there.
Yeah.
It's changed so much. The house church model is extremely successful. I would like to look at that and study it, but it's also not been, after all these years, and a lot of money, has not been successful in the developed world. It's not been successful in America.
And what you tend to find is that it works well when you're poor.
There's a variety of factors. One is it works well when you're poor, the business level, the economics, the scalability. It's also time. Like, we don't have time. The other thing is we think of house as home, when the New Testament version of house was home/business.
Right.
So for us to do it, we have to do a small. It ends up being a small version of church, where we're then trying to get people to our small group, which is not a natural thing. They're not naturally doing it. We put all of our energy into creating this other side thing that is now a small thing, but it's a huge amount of effort. And we're not actually taking the church, taking our values into where the community is already happening. Which, what is taking off here is business. Somebody may have called me. Somebody may have called me. I don't think I'm out.
Welcome to phase 2.
So, I find 2 things really interesting in this conversation. First of all, my wife and I have a small discipleship group in our home. And what we found that we have been doing is being fathers and mothers to people who are seeking God but are sometimes in the depth of personal crisis beyond measure, beyond belief almost. And we have seen God use context that he's helped to create there to change lives. And we have seen people change. Sometimes they come with us, come and stay one time, and then they go away, and they're touched by God, and they go away and do whatever they're doing. Other times we have people who stay and stay and stay and grow incrementally. I find myself at this listening to you both talking about creating an impact in the business world, going into the marketplace. I'm all for that. I think that's vital, it's important, it's where people spend a third of their lives, generally. Working people spend a third of their lives. But that's not my call. My call is to be this father in a small group of people that in time, God willing, will grow. But it's not centered in the business world, and every time I try to even think about going there, I feel like God is restraining me and saying, focus on this is what I've called you to do. So I think there's 2 aspects. I think there is an absolute need.
I want to respond.
You have 14 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
This is awesome.
I'm just going to tell you, I'm just going to come up very quickly. What I feel called to do is what I'm doing. What I find life in doing is what I'm doing. And I didn't really expect it. But I say that there's 2 aspects. There is the business world, and then there's the whole group of people who are wandering around, for lack of a better word.
So your ministry is primarily to like millennials?
Yeah, well, no, this is the crazy thing. It's
multi-generation.
From every age. We've got people in
How
there.
many of them have jobs?
I think all but one of them.
At the moment.
Yeah, at the moment.
95% of them.
90% have jobs, yes, but my goal is not. Our goal is to help people get to the place where God wants them, whether they choose to go and minister in businesses or not.
So why did you ask the question about how many of them have jobs?
Right.
Because this is the critical thing. One, this is what I'm trying to say. One, you absolutely need to keep focusing on this, being a father, being a mother, and bringing healing to the heart of individuals.
Right. That's what
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay?
That's my call.
What I want to, one, for Ernie and I,
Yes,
who's
right.
hyper fast process, we need to slow down and listen and one, affirm you. I am so glad you're not moving into the business world. And the Lord's restraining you from that. But I want to reframe that. And I want to say, bro, you're already in the marketplace. The marketplace is the matrix. We all
That
live
fits
that.
the word, right? The marketplace, I mean,
But
yeah,
I'm saying the number one first thing you need to say who's someone, I'm saying all of those people are working. The ones who aren't working probably need a job.
I'm completely
All
where
the
you're
people he's ministering to
going. Yes.
are in the marketplace. All of them are working.
I have no idea where you're going with this. I'm going somewhere completely different, so I'm confused.
I'm
Are you
trying to
saying
say,
that we should be aiming at people?
okay, let me tell you, I'm in the market. Let me say something that you guys can agree on, that I'm in the marketplace.
Okay. When you,
In the sense of, I'm meeting with a group of business leaders that we all agree are business leaders, and they're coming together in Mission Street in San Francisco, and I'm connecting with them. It's not a business meeting, they're not working,
Yeah, I
but
get
they're
that part,
networking,
yeah.
they're all in,
I get
it's
that,
very
yeah.
clear. So you would agree that that's,
yeah, sure, fine.
and you're saying I don't feel led to go there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, if I get there, what I'm hearing them say is I'm wounded inside. The number one thing for me to advance in my place is what's my identity? I don't have an identity. In other words, what you're so successfully imparting by who you are.
Right.
I'm saying this is the core of what we're bringing. And it's very organically already in the marketplace because, like it or not, you make the person better. They're either going to get the job, they're going to represent him there.
Okay. So I feel like I don't not disagreeing, but I feel like we're just talking about different things. I'm just disoriented at the moment. Like when I hear marketplace, I interpret that as what happens outside of home and church.
And I'm trying to say that is a false dichotomy
Okay, thank
we
you.
have that we need to tear
So,
down.
but yeah, I don't think the word
And
market.
think
If you're trying to get beyond that terminology, then the word marketplace is confusing me. Because that's what people have said. When they say we're doing a marketplace, it means we're not doing it in the church, and we're not doing smoke, so they take up a marketplace. That's why it may not be the right terminology. That's why I'm just confused. So
Okay.
the point is that it's holistic. It is all of life. And my point is that the fact that's why your question confused me. Because whether these people have jobs, whether they're young, whether they're disabled, whether they're retired, is irrelevant from my perspective. That's why I didn't understand the question.
Oh, I'm trying to reaffirm him to say, the Lord isn't telling you not go into the marketplace. The Lord is telling you, connect with us,
Yeah, but
focus on what you're really good at, because it's our mentality that needs to change.
right, yeah. So let me just.
And I'm saying that's extremely relevant to all of this,
Right.
because I think the secret sauce is tearing down this mentality.
Okay, so there we're in alignment. So I think my point is that we went off on a little tangent about marketplace ministry and tent making and business. That was not the point. But there is a point which I do want to make, so just to make it clear, is that like the vision of this platform, right, is that whether you are doing a marketplace ministry, whether you're doing a home small group, whether you're just discipling your family, for heaven's sakes, is that right now we have enormous amounts of resources and material for people who are doing church, as it's traditionally done. You know, seminaries and church planning. Right. We have a fair amount of infrastructure around missionaries. where you have, your Bible mission, U.S. Center for World Mission. Like, there's a path there. If I want to do this, these are the resources. This is the process I go through. This is how I get it. This is how I level up. There's a retreat, and there's a resource model where people understand that you go and do this, and you get money to do that. There is enormous amounts, insane amounts of money we spend on traditional education, especially higher education. But there's nothing for this small group discipleship, which is exactly, I think, what John is saying, is that that's primary. Is when you have a small group of people meeting together who want to do this. We don't have platforms, we don't have resource models where these people, which justifies someone investing in that process. And that's why, I do have a friend who works at one of these software companies that builds tools for small groups, but the vast majority of those tools are paid for by churches and are optimized for the church to manage the small groups. They're not optimized for the leader to be nurtured and cared for so they can father and disciple the people in their community. And that's the opportunity. And if you can get that platform right, then in theory, that or variants of it can work in business fellowship settings, in small group settings, in family settings, right? Is that there's a thing here which is like really, really hard and really, really important, and we have really, really minimal training. Like, how much training have I had in being a father, even though it's the most important job in my life?
Like, I had a friend of mine we were just talking about. He said, being a parent's hard. Doesn't come with a training model, yeah.
And 100 years ago, surgery was something that, in the cowboy shows, 150 years ago, if anybody gets shot, you're there, you do the surgery on him because you're the only one to do it, right? Now we're horrified at the thought that people would do surgery without being trained, without having the right resources. I feel that way about discipleship, about parenting, about running a small group. It's like, my God, this is the most important thing.
So I was trying to say to him, in my own way, the exact same thing that you're saying. If you could figure out what he's doing very well, you're you're doing this very, very well. This is proof of my concept. The churches, the system are broken, but they're filled with people like you.
Yes.
That if just a little tweak, they can do really, really well.
I don't know if it's a little tweak, that's the problem.
No, it will be a little tweak when we get it. It's hard to build the system. Once you get it, all you do is you buy an iPhone, and now the whole world's connected. Right. It'll be easy for them
to adopt. Yes.
How hard was it for him to go from being, well, I'd be interested in hearing your story, from being sitting on the sidelines, being part of church, going to church faithfully, but always feeling unfulfilled in the sense of I have so much more to offer. How do I offer it? And when somebody has a problem, like I noticed that when we were going to a certain church, like so bored because we're going there on Sunday, but why does the church do something Monday through Saturday? But then when we had a problem, when you have a crisis that was fulfilled, these people were so extremely helpful. It's like these are the best people in the world.
Yeah, so when you have a problem they know how to solve.
Yeah, if it's clearly defined how to help. Like when we had kids, when we had babies, it's like, these people are amazing. Like they're helping us so much, like so awesome. What I would be interested in your journey of what changed from you being bored to you being this place where, man, I know my niche and I'm focusing on it and it's fruitful and I want to.
It's not like that, but it's also really hard. Like one can imagine ways to make that job to basically automate, right? To create leverage.
I'm saying it's going to be a simple tweak for us once we figure it all out.
I don't want to promise that because there are some things which are intrinsically hard to struggle through. So easy to start doing, yes. Easy to master, not necessarily. Right? I don't want to promise that up front, right? Because there is a spiritual maturity is always hard, right?
But what I'm trying to say
and changing your model is
whatever.
I
want to bring the action items.
Okay.
You listed off all these things you can get for free as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
I want, as an action item, you delineate those and say this is where you get them.
I'll go you one better. In the last 3
show me your I want a list of so I can access them, and also because I believe that is a huge answer to the problem of what we're trying to do.
I'm going to go you one better. I'll just drop this in the last 3 minutes before we go. we talked about your fundraising, right? I would like to propose an experiment. Is that do your traditional fundraising, it's important, it's valuable, it needs to happen. It's going to be the bulk of your support for a long time. I would like to pitch the idea that we create I'm calling it a mastermind group. I don't have a better term for it yet, right? But it's like the Christian version of a mastermind group, focused on kingdom impact. Is we say like, okay, let's say your base, the average donor gives like X dollars a month. And we'll say one standard deviation from that is Y dollars a month. So it's kind of like someone who's a little bit more committed than average. We'll say we have a special opportunity for, let's say 11 people, that I'm starting this master's mind group because I want some people who are going to invest not just in me, but in themselves, and join along with me to help me work out and figure out this mission and build it up. And this is, you're going to get so much value from this, I can't give you a tax deduction for it. Because this is actually something that I'm committed to making something that's optimized to help you.
Why do I need to not give them a tax deduction?
Because if you're getting tangible benefits, it's so valuable that they're actually, it's actually, you're selling it to them as a service, like a mastermind. If you do a mastermind group where you're helping people, where you're actually promising people tangible benefits and services and tools and resources, it's an experiment.
No, I'm all for it. It's whatever. We can figure out the details. I'm all with the concept.
Yeah, but the idea is that
sell it to them on the value of it, not on the basis of a tax deduction.
It's not that you're going to help me be awesome. Right? This is something that's going to help you be awesome. And we will all become more awesome together in that process. And if I'm lucky, I will have something, and the pitch would be something like on May 1st, doors will open on this thing, and this will become, well, frankly, this group, the three of us, is Ecclesia 0. This will be Ecclesia 1. Ecclesia Club 1. I don't want to.
We're not going to use the term Ecclesia.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Whatever. We need to figure out a word.
Or maybe
discipleship club. I don't know. Whatever. Future Christianity is an awkward acronym, and I don't want to go there. But anyway, we'll figure out the name. The name is the least important thing until it becomes the most important thing. But this discipleship club, we'll call it that for now, or a master's mind group, right? Is that we'll model it on mastermind, and I will build the infrastructure one way or the other. My best guess at this point is to get it up and running. It'll be something like $100 a month for the hosting fees to get all the services and everything rated, and it'll be really minimal MVP, on May 1st. But the goal would be it's something that people could actually sign up for and start meeting and learning with. And it's a platform that's optimized for. It's a platform that uses video and learning to produce sustained behavioral change and maximum impact. That's kind of the vision of this platform, and I'm trying to convince. I'm meeting on Wednesday to pitch a guy who's building learning tools to build this thing for me because I need it for so many different things, and you would be customer 0. So,
all for it.
All right. Why don't you pray us out because John has to leave in a few seconds. Unless you had something else you wanted to say, John.
Unless John, I felt John should pray us out, but maybe we can both pray us out.
All right, well, I'll do it really quickly. Father, we just thank you for bringing us together. And we ask that you would continue to work in our lives and through us to establish the things that you purpose and plan. Father, I pray that you will help to sharpen not only our vision but also the model. And that what you purpose for each of us to contribute to that, we will be able to do it and do it with joy and eagerness in Jesus' name.
Father, we just lay this all before you.
Yes.
Father, I bless John, Lord, Father, and Lord, I just say all of this is for him, Lord, Father, Lord, and we just say, Lord, Holy Spirit, come.
Yes.
Lord, flip this whole model, Father. You are the secret sauce, your presence, and I thank you for these long-term relationships we've built
Yes.
60 years of relationship here. That's right. And of experience. Father, I bless Ernie to be the Daniel who designs this and runs it, the Joseph. Father, Lord, I bless myself. Lord, I bless all the others, Lord. And we say, Lord, we don't own the gospel. The gospel belongs to sinners. We don't own this. Lord, the gospel owns us. We're your servants, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I'm so glad we recorded this because I want people to understand it's not like anyone's particularly wise about this. We just throw everything we've got on the table and we just keep working at it until we figure out what God wants.
Yeah. Okay, so the action items very clearly is you're going to design this by May 1st. We're going to have our first.
So we'll work backwards, right? Is that, I think financially we want to get this designed by May 1st. You have added access to this already. You can reorder it and rename it. I'm going to use the Durham Discipleship Club for the tool.
Sure. That could be
a working title, yeah. And then I have a pitch to see if I can get this this startup guided, like who owns a lot of the pieces, to either build it himself or hire.
Who is the startup guy?
There's a company called Opinium, which is a learning management tool built on top of Salesforce. So it's for Salesforce, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And so.
Do you know Sue Warnke? She's at Salesforce.
I remember we were exchanging her. I haven't met her personally.
Salesforce gives to nonprofits.
Yeah, but I don't want to do this as a nonprofit. I want to do this as a business because I realize that the advantage of a business is that you can quantify the return on investment. And then
why can't you do that? Why can't you create the system to do that?
Because I don't want to raise $30 million to do this myself and build out a business around it. I would rather have the parts that are secondarily valuable be built up by someone who has a business model to justify investing in it.
Okay, then
nonprofits are really bad at investing in infrastructure.
Yes and no.
My friend.
Your experience, but I'm saying there's models out there that are incredible.
Right, but I have friends who've been beating it, running like Ryan Durfler, don't you?
Who?
Ryan Durfler used to be at City Team. Okay, maybe cross paths. He was here in the Bay Area, but anyway, he's trying to do we've been trying for like a few years with another guy who's been doing it for like 10 years to build a nonprofit about sharing information between organizations and building infrastructure to support the kingdom of God. And it's just an uphill climb because
I completely and totally agree with you that there's a place for both.
Right, yeah, the place.
And I'm saying I see the future being the organizations working alongside each other.
Right, yeah.
And different forms of nonprofit and different forms of for-profit organizations.
But things that...
Valley Christian, for example, it's a nonprofit. It has killed it at building infrastructure. Valley Christian has succeeded in this and is on the cutting edge and is changing the world.
Yes, and
they're a nonprofit.
Right.
And they've built infrastructure.
Right, but the problem with a nonprofit is that the stakeholders have a particular problem that they want to solve. And it's like everything else. If you have like venture capitalist, nonprofit, philanthropist, whatever, they have a job to be done. They are trying to solve a certain kind of problem. And if you are doing something that does not fit within those pieces, you have a mismatch. And there are certain things that they can do because they have that, and certain things they can't do because of that. And this thing has a piece that is spiritual and a piece that is technological. And it's hard to explain the technological piece to spiritual people who are doing philanthropic investments, and it's hard to explain the spiritual piece to technological people who are doing the financial. And so there's a significant amount of technological investment that needs to happen, which is high risk, high reward. And philanthropists in general are not good at high risk, high reward technological investments because they don't have they don't have the systems for evaluating what is awesome and what is a scam. And vice versa, right? And so that's
how much money do you think you're going to need to raise to build this thing?
Ideally, someone will pay me to build it. That's what we're shooting for, right? And actually, not even pay me. Like so, if you want to pray for something, I got to run. You walk me out to the car, and someone else's prayer request will stop the mic.